Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for being here. My name is Carrie Jorgensen, and I am CEO and co-founder of Early Bird. I'm a former independent and high school counselor and admissions reader at UC Berkeley and UC Santa Cruz. I've worked with over 1,000 families, and I can tell you that financial aid is one of the most stressful and confusing parts of the entire college application process. Just to give everybody a little bit of context, as of May 1st, about 55% of graduating seniors had completed the federal aid forms necessary to apply for financial aid. So clearly what that number tells us is that it's a huge piece of the college planning puzzle, and millions of families face this each year. So today I'm really thrilled to have Christy Collins here with me. She's from Pepperdine University. And Christy works in enrollment and financial aid. And every single day, she lives and breathes this, and she's going to give us a real insider look at how financial aid actually works on the institutional side.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks so much. Awesome. Well, let's get to it. So quick overview. Here's what we're going to be covering today. We're going to start with key terms. So it's a little bit of a lesson here. That's the Financial Aid 101. And the vocabulary terms that you really need to understand before anything else makes sense. Then we'll bust some money myths, because there's a lot of those out there, and make sure that everybody really understands the right items in order to navigate this process. We'll cover a true cost of attendance example. And then we'll hear directly from Christy at Pepperdine on her take around financial aid and some great insights. And we'll close with a live Q&A. So as we're talking, please think about your questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat as we go. And we will cover as many as we possibly can at the end of the webinar. Okay, so before we do anything else, I want to do a little bit of level setting and make sure everyone is speaking the same language, because these terms get thrown around and most families don't actually know what they mean, and the terms actually really matter in this process. The first one that I'll define for you is, let's see here. Can everybody see the screen okay?
We're seeing the screen, but we're only seeing the main page of the presentation. Very first page.
Let's see.
There we go.
Apologies. Okay, there we go. Thank you so much. Okay, so yes, would be helpful to have a little guide here. So we're going to start by defining some key terms. So the first one that I want to break down is FAFSA, and this is a term you absolutely will know about if your family is planning to apply for financial aid. So FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, free being the key word in that term. It opens every October of a student's senior year, and every family needs to file it, even if you think you won't qualify. I always tell my families that filing is the very first step, and you never know what will come from it, even if you've done some calculations and it looks like you might not qualify for need-based aid. But a lot of colleges actually go to look at families who have completed the FAFSA in order to award merit aid, which is aid that's given to you not based off of your family's financial need. So it's not too laborious of a process now. It used to be a really cumbersome process, but it is a pretty fast, easy form to fill out, and it's one that you absolutely should be filling out. Early is good as well. So it opens in October, and absolutely, I always tell my families, try and have the FAFSA completed by Thanksgiving. Because the sooner that you can have the FAFSA completed, the sooner a college, assuming that you get into that college, can get you an award package. And that helps with your decision making. And so you're not scrambling at the end of the process to be able to make the best and most informed decision in terms of cost. So FAFSA is a really big one, and one that you should definitely be marking your calendar for. The CSS profile. So that is another application that is required only by a certain set of colleges. So there's about 350 mostly private colleges that require this separate application on top of the FAFSA. And so what the CSS profile does, it also comes out around the same time as the FAFSA. And what it does, though, is you have to fill out the form, and it looks much deeper at things like home equity, business assets, and really can significantly change your aid package. The 350 colleges or so that require the CSS profile, they will not give you a financial aid package until you've done both the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So it's really important to stay on top of like understanding what the financial aid requirements are for the college. FAFSA goes to all schools, and CSS profile only goes to the ones that actually require that additional form. There is a cost to file the CSS profile. I believe it's $25 per school that you send it to, whereas the FAFSA is free. So just kind of different nuances, and shows you really that the devil is in the details here with these first few terms we're defining. The next term I want to define is sticker price. So that's the number on the brochure. That's the number that you see. It's the big old number that's in the many, many thousands of dollars. But I want you to know something, that the sticker price typically isn't the price that you actually pay. So keeping in mind that as you navigate financial aid will be really important. And I'll dive a little bit deeper into sticker price and cost of attendance in a bit. Net price. Okay, so this is the number that really matters. It's what your family will actually pay after grants and scholarships are applied. And so I always want my families to look at the net price as they're building their college list. Several years ago, it was a requirement, a mandate that colleges have a net price calculator on their financial aid website. And so through the Early Bird platform, we've actually linked the net price calculator for every single college onto our college cards, which give a lot of insight and great information about each of the colleges that we showcase on our platform. So it's a really easy way to find it. But essentially, as long as you have your tax documents from the previous tax year, it takes like 5, maybe 10 minutes max to fill out the net price calculator per college. And then it gives you the best estimate guess as to how much that particular college will cost you. Not Christy, but how much it will cost me, because our financial profiles are different. We have different income, different assets, etc. And so it really drills down on what that specific price is for you and your family. The next term that I'll define here is the Student Aid Index, SAI. There is something called an expected family contribution, but we really want to be talking about the SAI, or the Student Aid Index. And the Student Aid Index is a number that the federal government provides after the FAFSA is submitted. This number is then used to help colleges and financial aid offices determine a student's eligibility for federal financial aid. So it takes what you put into the FAFSA, and then you're given this Student Aid Index. And so the SAI is calculated based really on information from, like I said, what you put into the FAFSA, including income, assets, taxes, demographics, and many, many other factors that are above my pay grade, to be quite honest. And then there is cost of attendance. And so that's just another, it's a duplicative term to sticker price, but they're really the same term for getting to that same number. Both represent the total advertised annual cost to attend a college or university before that financial aid is applied. So there's your financial aid 101. The next thing that I want to turn to is really debunking a couple of myths that are out there that we hear from families all the time. And quite frankly, these myths are costing people real money. So myth number one, private colleges are too expensive. That's not necessarily true. So a school with a $70,000 sticker price that is able to give you a $35,000 grant may actually cost your family less money than an in-state school, for instance. So you can't really compare sticker price. You have to compare that net price. And that's why it's really important to do that on a school by school basis, and not count private schools out of the game, because private schools might be able to give more in terms of grant money. So myth number 2, public schools are always the affordable choice. Absolutely. If you pay taxes I'll use California as an example where I'm located. You're paying taxes, and as a result, you will be given that in-state tuition rate. In-state public schools are a great option and offer great value. But I just want to set the tone here that there's a lot of great out-of-state schools or out-of-state publics that can cost as much as a private school with less grant money available. So it really depends on your specific package. And it's important, again, to look at that net price, not be deterred by the fact that it says public or private, and really think about what that particular college will cost you. There's some schools that are public schools in other states that have pretty affordable tuition. And so even though maybe you're paying out-of-state tuition, that out-of-state tuition at a public school in a state that's not your own could end up being a comparable price to, say, a private school. And then you really need to look at the net price calculator to see what that college would actually cost your family. Let's see. Myth 3. I do hear this from time to time, which is families are fearful that they make too much money to really qualify for federal aid. And sometimes this stops families from even applying or filling out the FAFSA, as we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. And that's really a mistake. So merit aid, which is money that's given to students based off of a wide range of criteria, but every college has kind of their own formula for how they grant merit aid. But merit aid is not income based. And in order to be considered the most for merit aid, you really should complete that FAFSA. I'd love to know more thoughts that you have on that, Christy. But that's kind of the main guidance that we give families based off of merit aid. Anything to add there? Oh, can't hear you. No.
Oh my.
No, I can. No, I can.
Yeah. Okay. That was weird. Anyway, we hear from families often that they don't want to submit the FAFSA and because they don't think that they will qualify for aid, just exactly as you say. And while a family might not qualify for need-based aid from filling out the FAFSA, it does give access to other things that help the student with their financial aid package. For example, it can give them access to federal work study or unsubsidized federal loans. And a student needs to complete the FAFSA in order to have access to those things. So when in doubt, fill it out.
Yes.
And do it earlier rather than later.
Yeah. Great sentiment right there. When in doubt, fill it out. I love that. Yeah. So absolutely kind of goes back to the importance of no matter kind of what you think, it's worth going after it. So always apply. And then always compare aid packages if you have the chance to do that, because it's definitely worth looking kind of line by line and thinking through how much will this investment cost me and cost me for this first year, but also over the course of, the 4 to 5 years that you're in college. Myth number 4, the net price calculator is just an estimate and not worth using. So I do hear this a lot. It is a really powerful tool, and it's a tool that families should absolutely lean on. Is it 100% accurate? No, but it does a pretty good job of at least getting you a clearer picture of the most likely outcome for you and your family after you complete the FAFSA and actually apply. And so that's definitely something to keep in mind and to leverage throughout this process. It's a tool that I want families to really be aware of. Okay, so quick look here at a real example, just so this isn't so abstract, but take a private school, it's nonprofit college for the 26-27 school year, and the total cost of attendance for said private school is $58,000. So the school gives the applicant, in this case, an institutional grant of $18,000, And that leaves $40,000 still needed to cover that total cost of attendance. And so there is a new federal cap around loans. And so there's a Parent Plus loan that can cover $20,000. And in this case, that would leave a $20,000 gap per year that your family has to pay for either out of pocket or through private loans or some combination. And so the families who kind of understand the metrics and the calculations that go into looking at cost of attendance and how to sort of think big picture, how do we cover this entire cost and really be set up for the investment? The families that understand that early as they're building college lists, especially if you're building your college list around affordability, you're not scrambling your senior year. I've seen it happen where families don't invest enough time around really analyzing what that cost will be. And then a student gets into, say, their dream school, but the finances just don't work. And that can be really heartbreaking for students. And so that's also why it's really important to have a balanced college list, but also a college list that really reflects financial fit. And being upfront, I always tell parents, like, I think that talking with your student about money and the reality of what you can afford, like as young as sophomore year, is only going to benefit everybody in the family, because it really is, not something to just ignore and say, hey, we'll figure it out, because you're making a relationship and a decision for your future. And we want for that decision to be made with intention. And so just kind of understanding how this all truly breaks down and, having $20,000 to figure out and to fill the gap. There's so many scholarships out there and so many scholarships that are left untouched. So there's definitely ways to fill that gap. It's just building in that earlier awareness that is really, really important. Okay, over to you, Christy.
There's a couple, can you hear me? I know
Yes.
I couldn't hear you first. Okay, a couple additional thoughts that I wanted families to hear is that in addition to those things that Carrie presented on that chart, she had the institutional grant, which can be merit or need-based aid in that institutional grant. But typically colleges will package students with other things if they have completed the FAFSA. And one of those things is federal work study. Federal work study is an excellent way for students to work while they are a student. And federal work study is essentially a program with the government where the government subsidizes the student's salary on campus. Students are required to go find the job and they're required to work the hours, but then a student gets a paycheck that goes directly into their, checking account. It does not credit toward a student's tuition payment. But colleges are often listing student employment and federal work study in their financial aid letters. So that can be a confusing element for families, though they might see like a $3,500 work study award, and a student actually needs to earn that money before they get that money. And if a student doesn't qualify for federal work study, they can still typically engage in institutional work programs on campus. And one thing I noted here is that on campuses, there are a lot of jobs that can pay students particularly well. And typically these are jobs that are not available to first-time students, and they are reserved for returning students, sophomores through seniors. And ones that I really would encourage families to consider are jobs with food and housing stipends. Almost all colleges offer these. They're typically for resident advisors on campus, the students who oversee students in the residence halls. And if you're thinking about the long-term costs and because it's at least a 4-year commitment, I encourage families to think about encouraging their kids to pursue jobs with food and housing stipends during their sophomore through senior year can make a huge, huge difference. And there's great benefit with student employment. It's real work experience. I'm a huge, huge, huge proponent. At Pepperdine, we have about 30 student employees just who work in our office to help do campus tours and whatnot. There's a lot of really, really fun ways to fulfill campus jobs on campus. I know Carrie mentioned too that outside scholarships are something that students should be pursuing, and we encourage families to start applying for outside scholarships as soon as they start high school. It's never too early to start racking up outside scholarships. And but I want to encourage families to pay attention to restrictions of scholarships, because a lot of scholarships might say that they are only for tuition, which is great. Tuition scholarships are great, but there are also some scholarships that can pay for things like food and housing. And so if a student had a huge financial aid package, for example, from a school, and you bring an outside scholarship that only covers tuition, that school will adjust institutional grants to accommodate the outside scholarship amounts. That doesn't happen very often, that a student is totally bringing in scholarships of that size, but just an important thing to know. And then there are typically opportunities for students, returning students, to get more scholarships once they are on campus. For example, at Pepperdine, we don't have very many impacted majors on campus, which means a student, if they want to be a business major, they don't have to apply to the business school. They can select to be business major. The business division has lots of scholarship for business majors. So once a student is a junior or a senior, they can apply for additional scholarships within that division. And that is something that students would find at most schools. Sometimes it can be a one-time, one-semester scholarship. Sometimes it can be for the duration of a student's career. But there's lots more money on the table if a student is committed to applying for it and asking for it.
Absolutely. Great tips. All righty. Okay, so let's see. In terms of, these are 4 questions that I want to highlight that really every family should be writing down and asking either themselves or the schools on their list once they get their aid packages. These are just some really important considerations. So the first question is, what does the net price calculator actually tell my family? So cannot stress this again. I think this might be my 3rd time mentioning this, but you really want to run the exercise of going through the net price calculators. I have my families usually spend 1 to 2 hours doing this. I say, pick a Sunday afternoon and just run the numbers and keep a running spreadsheet of, here's the colleges on my list and here's what the net price calculator is actually telling me. I really want you to try and do this too before you visit a campus, because sending your kid on a visit to a campus where the finances most likely won't work out can be kind of heartbreaking, especially if the student really falls in love and it's just not in the cards for you financially. So kind of walk into the process with eyes wide open is really the takeaway there. The second question is what counts as meeting financial need? So schools, you'll hear this kind of buzzword a lot. There's some schools out there that say that they meet full financial need. Schools really define this very differently. And so you want to know kind of what percentage of your actual demonstrated need is covered by grants, which is money you do not have to pay back, versus loans, because loans are not free money. Eventually you will have to pay those back. So just being aware of kind of how the messaging is for a school and what that actually means for you. And I will tell you, the folks who work in the financial aid offices of just about every college I've had a student call are incredibly helpful. They really want to educate you and help you. Either maybe you're running into a snag through the actual application process of applying for financial aid, or you're really having a hard time understanding the award in front of you. I've seen it where financial aid officers will like set up meetings with families and really walk them through line by line what they're looking at, so that you can really have that full picture. So lean on the financial aid offices of the colleges that you're applying to, and don't worry about like, will this, sway my chances of getting in if they know that I'm in need of financial aid? The answer is no. Like, if you have the question, ask it, because these people are there to help you. Really want to support you in your journey and help you, find your best fit financially and otherwise. So the third question here is how does aid change after freshman year? And this is an important one. Some schools give you a great package your first year, and then it's reduced in years 2, 3, and 4. And so really asking directly about aid sustainability is really important. I often have students tell me like, oh my gosh, I got into X school and I got this scholarship. And so then my question back to them is, that's awesome. Does this scholarship, is this a 4-year scholarship or is this a one-time scholarship? And because if it's a one-time scholarship, that really means that you will get to go to that school on a discounted rate that first year. But what does that mean for your sophomore year and junior year and senior year? So just being a smart consumer on all fronts is really important. And then the fourth question is, do you have an institutional loan program? So there's not a ton of colleges that do this, but there are a handful of rather well-endowed schools that offer their own loan programs with better terms than what you can get in the private market. So again, worth knowing, colleges' financial aid pages have an abundance of great tips and insights. And it's just, again, if there's any takeaway from this, it's really worth getting into the fine print when it comes to financial aid and the cost of college. So in terms of how Early Bird is here to support families with this. We've really obviously covered a lot today in terms of defining key terms, debunking financial aid myths, reviewing cost of attendance, learning more about Pepperdine and how they think about financial aid. And we want for the takeaway for today's presentation to be that, we really don't want you to have to feel like you're navigating this on your own. And we know that a lot of families are doing it without a roadmap. And so that's really why we built Early Bird. So just a quick plug here on our platform, you get access to view over 250 colleges, all with 80% or higher retention rates. So these are colleges that do an exceptional job at keeping students happy year after year. And then of those colleges featured on our platform, Pepperdine being one of them, you can also have access to those net price calculators that we've talked so much about today. And so you really do get a lot of intel all from kind of that one view on the colleges that we showcase. And then you also get a personalized roadmap from 8th grade through senior year so that nothing sneaks up on you. And that roadmap shifts each semester and then also in the summer. So 3 different times throughout the year, you're served a set of what we call college planning rings that really anchor the experience for you and bring you through the entire college planning journey from nuts to bolts. And so can't stress enough how important that roadmap is. And then we also have what's called a fit score. And the fit score is really grounded in fit and real affordability. And so what we will have you as a family do is complete what we call a Fit Finder survey. And then through the Fit Finder survey, looking at your transcript and your test scores, we can give you a fit score. And so that allows you as the consumer to really understand the landscape much better in terms of admissibility and the right fit for you as a student. And then we have Robin, who's our AI guidance engine, and she is great at keeping students on track and kind of surfacing those things as a user in our platform that you can be doing. So really a full tool that's designed to help you from A to Z. So please create an account at earlybirdcollege.com. It takes just a couple minutes, and really it's $29.99 a month. We have a 7-day free trial, and I couldn't recommend more getting started on that front. So that just about covers the content for today's financial aid kind of 101 presentation, but I would absolutely love to end with some questions. And so anyone in the webinar, please feel free to submit those to the chat, and we will absolutely try and answer them. Let's see. Okay, so Eric, it looks like he asked, what's the best way to use a 529 plan and what can it be used for? Christy, do you want to take that one?
Yes. 529 plans are a great way to help cover the cost of a student's education. I believe there's a 20,000 annual cap in terms of how much a family can use in any given year. I think it's 20,000. So if a family has an excess of 20,000 in the 529 plan, or even not, I would definitely encourage families to spread it out over the student's planned time in college. So if a student is planning on pursuing 4 years at a university, to think through, okay, how can I use this over 4 years instead of utilizing it all in 1 year. For example, if there is a 20,000 cap, don't use all that 20,000 in 1 year, because that is going to be really, really painful to address once a student is a sophomore, junior, senior. We do see things like this where families are willing to leverage everything they have to get their child through 1 year of college without thinking through the big picture. And then a student ends up not being able to register for classes during their sophomore, junior year, just because their family leveraged everything for their first year. So definitely think about spreading it out. And it can typically be used for any of the expenses, including food and housing. So I think it can even be used to help cover fees for something like studying abroad. So they're a really, really powerful mechanism for families, and I highly encourage families to pursue that for their kids.
Definitely. Great question.
Yeah. One other question I think that families should ask is how and they should ask the financial aid offices, this is how they would expect their costs to increase each year, because even if a financial aid package stays the same, for example, the institutional grants staying the same, merit need-based scholarships staying the same, the tuition and food and housing costs will increase each year. And I think families should ask the financial aid offices over the past several years, how much has tuition increased each year?
Definitely important to be aware of the trend that's happened and what they project into the future from a budget standpoint.
I just keep thinking of questions that we get asked a lot.
Great.
Some colleges do offer payment plans where a family can set up, monthly payments throughout the semester. Some colleges require one-time payments before classes start. And so those are good questions to ask as families are thinking through their budgeting. And there's a lot of different repayment scenarios with loans. For example, student loans, no repayment begins on them during when a student is in school, but Parent Plus loans, repayment begins on them immediately. So it's really important to understand the differences between all the elements. And I'll say most colleges do tell families all the information in FAQs, on their websites and whatnot, or even in aid notification letters. But I find that families are really overwhelmed and they don't tend to read all of the FAQs, and their instinct is to go straight to the office and ask for questions, which is fine. Like financial aid offices are obviously happy to answer questions, but say 5,000 families are asking for questions at the same time, and they're asking questions that you actually have the answers to in your inbox already. And so I would really encourage families to read through every financial aid related component that the school will send to you, because often the answer is in there.
Definitely one big exercise in the fine print.
Yes.
Christy, I
Yes.
know Pepperdine recently rolled out early decision.
Mhm.
For everybody on the call, that means it's a binding agreement. So if a student falls in love with Pepperdine, how could you not? It's in beautiful Malibu, offers top-notch education with an ocean view. They decide they want to apply early decision to
Mhm.
school. What does that mean in terms of financial aid, and how should families be thinking about that? Because the binding nature of early decision is exactly that. You're bound to that school. So how do you counsel families around that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that cost should be a little bit more of a factor in families' minds when they are thinking about early decision schools, where a student might decide to apply early decision. And also, most schools, in my experience, from what I see, and Pepperdine definitely fits into this category, students are getting the same aid whether they apply for early decision, early action, or regular decision. So the actual type of aid package will not shift based on which deadline a student applies for. Which means that net price calculator is important. And quick note about net price calculator, typically they are built on actual real awards from the previous year. So that's where the data is coming from. And we do have a clause in our early decision agreement that allows families to withdraw if they can't make it work financially. So that we do have that built in. But if a family does the net price calculator and it is very clear that they cannot make it work financially, early decision is not typically the mechanism to make it work.
Right. And we could debate all day whether applying early decision or not is the right choice. But the other takeaway here is, if you don't apply early decision, then you do have the chance to really compare aid packages across schools and make the most informed decision for you as a family and as a consumer. I mean, that's really what you are. You're forging a relationship where you're paying a college, and you want to make sure that your dollars go to the right place. And so there's pros and cons for sure. But that is one benefit if you choose not to apply early decision, is you get the luxury of time and really reviewing aid packages. And it surprises me, when I have students who wait and they see the outcome of schools, like oftentimes it will actually be a private school that from the get-go, they were like, this is way too expensive. I don't think I'd end up going here. But that private school throws in a lot of merit aid because they really want the student and it's a great fit. They've admitted them. And that can sometimes be the deciding factor that pushes the student towards ultimately going to that private school that they originally thought would be out of cost or out of their budget.
Agreed.
Any other questions or points
I
you want?
see Dennis has asked, can a child receive multiple scholarships, and are scholarships renewable each year? If yes, are there conditions you should know about? Typically, most schools will offer or can offer multiple scholarships. And what that might look like is actually, when a family sees their initial aid package, it will probably look like any need-based aid that a family might be receiving, and then the merit-based aid after that. And depending on how a school structures it, it can be multiple scholarships, it can be one scholarship. At Pepperdine, we only really offer one institutional grant and one merit scholarship at the outset, but students can earn multiple scholarships once they are a student, and they can stack. At Pepperdine, all of our incoming aid, or all of our aid for incoming students, is renewable every year. Some schools might offer special enrollment scholarships, special incentives of a scholarship to enroll by a particular date or something, and those most likely won't be renewable. There should be fine print that a school lists if a scholarship is renewable or not, but you know, I can only speak to what we do at Pepperdine. We do note it everywhere. And then in terms of conditions, I think a good example to think about this is, say, outside scholarships. Say a student gets a scholarship from an organization in their hometown. That scholarship, say it's a $5 scholarship. That $5,000 scholarship likely has specific restrictions associated with it. It can say this is a tuition only scholarship. It can only be utilized for tuition. It can say this scholarship can be utilized for any costs associated with the education. And in today's day and age, it's rare that I see a student receiving so many tuition-oriented scholarships that their overall aid package might be reduced by the institution, but it does happen. Say like a student gets $40,000 in outside scholarships and the institution offered $30,000 in tuition-based scholarships, and cost of tuition is only $50,000. Then a student will literally have more tuition scholarships than the tuition costs, and the institution will just reduce their institutional scholarships so that the student can use their outside scholarships. I realize how I said that is very confusing, but it is complicated and confusing. It is.
But don't let that deter you from applying to
Agreed.
scholarships, because that's something that you have more direct control over than what the institution will give you. Generally speaking, if you're going to apply to colleges where you are at or above the middle 50%, and now we're getting in the weeds here, but when you're looking at test scores and GPA, and this is where our FIT score that's on our platform is super important. But if you're going to be applying to colleges where you are going to be attractive to that school because your numbers are kind of more above what they typically admit, the likelihood of scholarships and institutional monies goes up because that kind of counts into the merit aid category. So again, building that thoughtful list and having it balanced and really going after schools that you feel like you're going to have a stronger chance of not only getting an acceptance, but getting more scholarship dollars is really important. And then one other point I want to make related to scholarships is local. There are many scholarships out there, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Coca-Cola Scholarship. There's great big national scholarships. If you want to take the time to apply to those, absolutely. But that needs to be priority number 2. Priority number 1 needs to be to apply to local organizations in your hometown, maybe that are sponsored by the Rotary Club or sponsored by your high school. Your high school counselor will absolutely have a list of local scholarships that you should be looking at. And chances are that the applicant pool for those local scholarships is a lot smaller than if you're applying to the Coca-Cola scholarship that gets 1 million plus, applicants for it. So you just need to be thoughtful and strategic about what you're going after to try to get as much free money towards your college tuition as possible. And I really loved your point, Christy, of like, start early. There are scholarships out there for student athletes, for instance, who are rising juniors. Like that would be great. I know not a lot of sophomores are necessarily thinking about this, but if you're on this call and you have a younger student, like now would be a great time to start looking into that.
Because we advise students to apply for scholarships always throughout their entire college experience too. Never stop applying.
Yeah.
Treat it like a mini part-time job.
Yeah, exactly. Any other questions before we wrap up? We're just at right about time. No? Okay. Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to send the recording. Thank you so much for being here, and a huge thank you to Christy for joining us and just lending some further insight into really how this process works from the institution side. So thank you, Christy.
Happy to be here.
Excellent. Okay, and I'll wrap up with there is a survey link in the chat. And so if you would like a free month of Early Bird for you and for a friend, please take our survey, which is linked in the chat. And then also please plan to register for our next webinar, which is scheduled for Wednesday, June 3rd, and is really a deep dive into, the application and essays. So really relevant for rising seniors as they are working through what they're going to say on their college applications and putting together the best possible application. And that's Wednesday, June 3rd. And you can access the registration link for that just through our website. So thanks again and take care.